The Middle Earth strategy battle game is an amazing game filled with deep tactics and some awesome cinematic moments, and you can play it with your favorite characters from Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. But with a huge amount of rulebooks, a heap of factions, confusing stockings on Games Workshop's website, getting started can be a bit confusing. So today, we're going to go through exactly what you need to get started in the Middle Earth strategy battle game. Let's start by talking about books. There are a whole bunch of books that Games Workshop has put out now. We have the main rulebook, which contains all of the rules to actually play the game. And then we have the army books for the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit. These contain all of the profiles that you need to use any army from either of those movie series. For example, the Lord of the Rings book has all of the profiles for Gondor, Rohan, Mordor, and heaps more, whereas the Hobbit book has the profiles for the Mirkwood Elves, the Legions of Azog, and Goblin Town. There are also a lot of supplements, like Gondor at War, War in Rohan, and the Scouring of the Shire. These books contain the profiles of any of the models that were released after the army books were put out. They also contain special rules called Legendary Legions, where if you take a specific selection of models that have a thematic matchup, you get a couple extra rules. For example, the Riders of Theoden is that exact moment in the movie where the Riders of Rohan all charge down into the Mordor lines. You have to have everyone on horse, and you can take Theoden and a bunch of the heroes that were actually there in the movies, but obviously you can't take the ones that didn't turn up. In exchange for this restricted number of models, you get a couple of extra special rules that make the army play more similar to what they did in the movies. There are a lot of Legendary Legions, and they add a lot to the game. You absolutely by no means do not need Legendary Legions, they're just if you want to play a specific theme that has been covered in one of these supplements. And let's talk about the models. There's 43 factions, so there are thousands of models that have been made for Middle Earth. Unfortunately, at the moment, Games Workshop isn't stocking all of them, so some models can be rare and hard to track down. This means that certain factions might be a little bit more challenging to find. But for when you're just starting out, they should have access to everything that you want, and later on we're going to talk about where you can find all of those other models. Let's answer the question of where is the best place to start in Middle Earth. And unsurprisingly, the starter kit is a great starting point. In the starter kit, you get a really decently sized Mordor army that's actually big enough to be used at, any regular point sized. It's not like the starter kits for games like Warhammer or Warhammer 40,000, where the starter kit only contains a tiny force that you need to expand upon a lot. These armies are actually playable on their own, and they're pretty solid. In the evil side, you get the Witch King, 36 Morannon Orcs, and a Troll. It's perfect for playing the scenarios. To play it in match play games, you want to get a couple more heroes in there. Usually, when you make an army of Middle Earth, you need one hero for every 12 troops you have. What I recommend doing is adding in the Shagrat and Gorebag pack. It's pretty cheap, and they're two really solid heroes. Another option would be adding in the Mordor Commanders pack. It comes with a captain, a drummer, a banner bearer, and a shaman. All of those models are actually really useful, so it's a perfect way to take this army from the starter kit and make it a fully well-rounded army that you can play at tournaments. On the good side, you have Theoden, 12 Riders of Rohan, and 12 Warriors of Rohan. Now, this is actually a decent starting point there. All you need to do is add a couple heroes like Aemir and maybe Gamling, and you've got a solid Rohan army. Now, just remember that when you make a list, your model's horses can die and they need to be replaced by a model on foot. So that means that you don't want to build your list with all 12 warriors and all 12 riders, because then if a horse dies, you'll be caught out. The starter kit also comes with some Army of the Dead. Now, this is my number one recommended army for new players. The Army of the Dead are super easy to get. Obviously, they're in the starter kit, but also you can find them secondhand because they're in the starter kit. And there are two boxes that I would add to them to make a full army that's ready for tournaments. That's the King of the Dead and the 3 Hunters. This army is part of a Legendary Legion, and it is perfect for starting out with because it's really solid. You've got high defense, so generally if you make little mistakes, you don't get punished as badly, and it's pretty straightforward and strong. Also in the starter kit, you get some dice, measuring tape, as well as the main rulebook. So you're off to a good start. But there is one more thing that you need to get alongside the starter kit, and that is the Armies of Middle Earth, which will contain all of the profiles with their points value for this set. Alright, so let's say you've already had a look at the starter kit, but you don't want to go with any of the factions in there. Well, that's fine. Let's have a talk about the rest of them. There are 43 factions in Middle Earth, and I actually made a video where I talk about every single one. I break down their playstyle, how strong I think they are, and add a couple more bits of information about them. You can check out that video in the top corner. My advice for picking your first army is generally just pick the one that you think looks the coolest. Don't worry too much about how strong or powerful it is initially, just pick either one that looks the coolest or your favorite character from the books or movies, and you can build an army around them. Generally, when you pick something that looks cool, you're going to be a lot more excited to paint it, and no matter what army you pick, when you're just starting out at Middle Earth, it takes a little while to get the hang of it, and this is definitely a game of skill, so just bringing a strong list won't be enough to win you games. You've got to practice with it and get to understand it, as well as understanding the armies that your opponents might bring against you. So that's all well and fine if you pick one of the factions that has all of the models available to it. But let's say you want to play a faction like Arnor or Mahud. Well, these models aren't currently well stocked by Games Workshop, so where can you go to find them? Well, the first place that I would recommend is jumping onto a Facebook buy-sell swap page. There are a whole bunch of different ones, and some of them are region specific, so I recommend getting into one that suits your country, and then just make a post and see if people have what you're looking for. Or just stay in the group and keep your eyes open for models, because pretty often you'll see most things coming through. Now, this definitely isn't ideal, but Games Workshop is fixing this. As the game grows in popularity again, more and more of the old out-of-production models are coming back into regular sales and coming available in made-to-order things occasionally. Now, let's say that you've looked for secondhand models and they're not quite doing it for you. The great thing is that there are a heap of alternative miniatures out there. For example, historical miniatures of the Zulus work perfectly for the Mahuds, and kind of any generic fantasy knights could work well for Arnor. Just be open to maybe doing some conversions to tie them into Middle Earth. If you want to know how to build your first army list, pick your favorite character, pick some troops, add them in, and then pick your next favorite character and some more troops and add them in. Pick a couple elite troops and some regular troops, and as you play with them, you'll pick up more and more. If you want to jump straight into proper list building, then I have a video on how to write a competitive army list here on the channel. But if you're just starting out, it goes into a lot of detail, so don't worry too much about it. As you play games, you'll pick up more and more information. Now that you've got your rulebooks and you've got your army, you need to find some people to play against. And the best way to do this is jumping into a community Facebook page. Here in Australia, we have the Australian Middle Earth Strategy Battle Game community page. It's really good, and at any time you can just post, hey, I'm looking for a game in this region, and usually you'll find someone to play against. Most areas will be the same. We've got the United States group, the British group, and there's at least a couple European groups. Another group that I would recommend joining that is brand new is the Conquest Creations community group. I've just made it to celebrate almost hitting 5,000 subscribers. It's going to be a cool place where you can jump in and hang out with other people who are interested in games like Middle Earth and post photos of your painting, as well as talk about games and tactics and new model releases. If you enjoy the channel, it's a really great place to be more involved in our community. Now that you've got your miniatures, painting them is a massive part of the hobby. We're not going to dive into it here because a lot of people are coming from other wargames, and there's a lot of other videos covering this in detail. But if you don't want to paint your Middle Earth army, then feel free to get in contact with me at my website where we can talk about my commission painting which I offer. And that's all you need to know to get started in Middle Earth. Just remember, the starter pack is a great place. Add in the Armies of Middle Earth book, any of the supplement books you can think about if you need those models or those legendary legions, but they're not essential right at the start. Honestly, I don't own most of them still. That has been all for this video. Thank you for watching.